discussions on tonight. These are 2023 data points. In 2019, 2020, there were 20% of adults experiencing a mental illness. As noted, this is equivalent to over 50 million Americans. Also, the vast majority of individuals with a substance use disorder in the United States are not receiving any type of substance abuse treatment. Community, that's over 15% of adults in America. Over 1 in 10 youth in the United States are experiencing depression that is severely impairing their ability to function at school or work, at home, with family, or in their social life. Another statistics, 6.34% of youth in the United States reported a substance use disorder in the past year. Something to hit home a little more in the community, 16%, which is 4.8 million of Black and African American people reported having a mental illness. 439,000 African Americans ages 18 to 25 years old had serious thoughts of suicide in 2018. This is a 6% increase from 2008. So these alarming statistics, Jackson Miss Alumni Chapter Delta Sigma Theta thought it would be befitting to bring to the community an array of mental health issues that are impacting the nation as a whole, but it's also penetrating our very own communities in which we live daily. As a licensed clinical social worker who has worked in various mental health fields for over 17 years, I have seen firsthand how mental health conditions, if treated properly, can lead to persons living successful lives in recovery. We bring a panel of experts who are centered in our very own communities and can speak to us regarding these impactful issues. I will introduce them now. Our first panelist is Shalonda D. Carlisle. Shalonda D. Carlisle is a native of Jackson, Mississippi. She's a psychotherapist and adjunct professor. She graduated from the University of Mississippi with a bachelor's degree in social work and a double master's from Jackson State University. She's working on her doctorate in urban and regional planning. She brings today over 20 years of experience as a social worker. She's also serving as a board member with the Alcohol Service and a growing up facilitator in Jackson, Mississippi. Next, I will introduce to you Mr. Jeffery Harvey. He is a native of Jackson, Mississippi. He earns his BS degree from Tougaloo College and received his master's degree in mental health counseling from Jackson State University. He has been active in the field of drug, alcohol, and violence prevention for the past 3 years. Jeffery started his journey at Hines Behavioral Health as a certified peer support specialist and was empirical with incorporating a premier opioid addictions program in the state of Mississippi. He currently serves as the clinic director of Jackson CDC. Jeffery, I'm intrigued and I am ready to listen to your mental health success story that you will be bringing us on today. Lastly, I will introduce to you Rachel Daniels. She has a master's degree in social work. She received that degree from the University of Southern Mississippi, and she has earned her master's degree in social work from Jackson State. She has been practicing social work in Mississippi since 2002. Rachel Daniels is a business owner and consultant in counseling with Rachel. She's a private practice and has been in private practice owner since 2019. She serves as a mental health commissioner for Hines Behavioral Health. She has also worked with abused and neglected children and has worked with over 1,700 victims. She's also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and she's also a member of National Associations of Social Workers. Thank you all for being here today. The purpose of this mental health forum is to inform, educate, and for learning valuable resources. Our first panelist will come to us and present to you on today, and I will turn it over to Mr. Jeffery Harvey. Are you ready to present some information to us on today?
Good evening. How is everybody doing? Okay. Well, I like the statistic that you gave, and I also like to add to that that those were diagnosed, that people that admitted to having a diagnosis. Research also says 9 out of 10 people who have a substance use disorder never seek treatment and are not eligible to receive treatment because of other barriers that they have, like lack of insurance and other kind of health disparities that come along with it. Um, people say that I have a mental health success story, but in all honesty, I just don't see it that way. First of all, I think I'm blessed. Um, and I've been given the opportunity to live 2 lives in one lifetime. I don't know if I made a typo on that that bio I sent you, but I've been doing this close to 15 years. I think it might be old. And I always like to start out by saying that, I have served in every capacity of the people that I oversee. I've been a case manager. I did drug and alcohol prevention with children. Um, I was a therapist, where I did direct service, and I went all over into administration. I'm glad to have one of the commissioners for Hines Behavior Health, which is a great place for those people with those health disparities. And I'll just leave that there. Um, I am a native of Jackson, and my story is really no different than anybody else. I was raised by a very young mother. I never met my father a day of my life, and my grandmother primarily raised me. My grandmother taught me how to cook, clean, wash clothes, and one thing she always instilled in me, she said, "Boy, don't you ever get with a woman because you need her." She said, "You be with a woman because you want her." And the point that she was driving home to me was, you cook and clean for yourself, and nobody's your slave. And those things have stuck with me through my life. Now, my grandmother taught me, basic things that I'm sure most people in here, their parents taught them: how to cut the grass, how to keep what you have, take care of what you have, even if it's not a lot. She taught me the value of education, and she had a third grade education. She worked for Jitney Jungle. I don't know if anybody here old enough to remember that grocery store. My grandmother was the McCarty's personal maid, and she used to take me to work with her, and she taught me the value of work. I always like to start out by saying it, but somewhere along the line, I didn't obviously take that out into um, my real life, but she did raise me in the ways of God, so it was easy for me to return. Um, and what ended up happening to me was, again, no different than any other teenager. I started to experiment. I was this little awkward looking kid. I was very skinny. I thought I had a long head. I had big teeth, and I always felt uncomfortable. So the point I'm driving home was the contributing factors to my substance use were already there. And at about 9 years old, my grandmother got sick. And it's okay. Nobody gets sad. She lives. She's 97 years old right now. She'll still tell me how to carry the cabbage. But I had to go live with my mother. And my mother had me when she was 15 years old. And I have a brother older than me. And she had him when she was 13. So we basically got raised together. And my mother married an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic in the height of the cocaine epidemic. And he later became addicted to crack. And excuse my language, but I watched this man beat the hell out of my mama as a child. And I can always remember being very afraid as a kid. And later on, I ended up, my sister's father, actually, he ended up molesting me as a child. And I share that because every time I talk about that with a group of people, it never fails. Somebody pulled me to the side and said, that happened to me. My point is, the things that I have gone through in my life, I have since realized that, nothing happened to me, it happened for me. And everything I went through, God uses what used to be my greatest liabilities as my greatest assets. Um, but I did go through some hard times there. Even as a young adult, I did manage to, I dropped out of high school, but I did end up marrying a very sweet young lady who was a heaven sent to me, because she later talked me into going back to take my GED and to go back to school. And we didn't make it, but we co-parent well together. We have two beautiful daughters. Both are pre-med now. And but I went through some extreme, I started with marijuana. That's why I do call it a gateway drug. I started smoking marijuana at about 16 years old. And I'll try to speed through this without talking war stories, but you name it, I did it. I've been shot, stabbed, I flatlined on the table from overdosing from opiates. I've been incarcerated. Fortunately enough for me, I hadn't been to prison, but I did spend a lot of time in county jail for, unlike most people would tell you, for things that I did. I've never been arrested for something I didn't do. And to get sober for me, my sobriety date is May 25th, 2010. I've been sober for 13 years. And but that was a long journey for me. I started out smoking marijuana, and I eventually moved over into some stronger things like PCP. I dabbled in a few other things. I stayed sick. I want to harp on this point. In the African American community, I will say this: there's a lot of stigma tied to substance use disorders. We still have this idea that we can pray it away, and I couldn't pray away a substance use disorder any more than somebody can pray away another psychiatric diagnosis. And I always like to hear when people say substance use disorder treatment and psychiatric and mental illness. And what I always tell people is, yet we diagnose it all out of the same DSM-5, or DSM-5 TR now. My point is, doing active addiction, I was insane, and it was almost like Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. Like, I am not the man I am not the man you see today. And a lot of the behaviors that I was exhibiting, I didn't get raised to do these things. But from the time I put substances in my body, I didn't feel like this little skinny, buck-tooth, scared kid anymore. And eventually I ended up doing some things that I didn't get raised to do. So after a while, it turned from using these things to feel okay, so I was really masking, because I knew the stuff I was doing was wrong. I'm not one of those people who would play ignorant to what I was doing. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and eventually it played on my conscience enough that using mood altering substances quieted those voices for me. But then the day came, the hideous horsemen, the four horsemen, terror, bewilderment, and I got to a point where I actually wanted to commit suicide, but I was too coward to do it, and I knew that I wouldn't share in the kingdom of God if I did that to myself. That's just my belief, because I don't think I could repent for that. And I had a lot of pending criminal charges, and I'm not talking about misdemeanor charges. I was looking at 21 years in prison. And the man who I stood in front of, well, first of all, the first angel I stood in front of was Judge Tommy Green. And this lady, I won't give you the long version, I'll give you the short version. This lady she went to Tougaloo College. And she found out that I was in school, first semester, true story. First semester at Tougaloo, I was on the dean's list. And she pulled my transcript for an old charge that I had. I was in jail for an old charge that I had, and I got pulled out of school the second semester at Tougaloo. And I stayed incarcerated for about 2 months. And I was anticipating dropping out, and things like this let me know that there is a creator and it's not Jeff. When I went to court, this lady, I was in jail, and I got out, and I did finish my first semester, and I went on through school, and I got to my senior year of undergraduate, and I got indicted for this charge. And I sat in jail. I sat my senior year out. I had wrote my paper on the dean's list, and I sat my senior year out of undergrad college in a jail cell for a whole year. But when I went to court for this charge, this lady looked and she pulled my transcripts, and I guess she said a lot of people use the excuse of they in school to get out of trouble. And she looked, and she had this look of like, now we're colleagues and I work with her in the courts a lot. And she said she had this look of like she was confused. And she was like, Mr. Harvey, what are you doing in jail? And I explained to her just like I'm explaining to you all. But I had not told myself that I am the real McCoy. People say to this day, I've had the luxury of helping over 23,000 people, in direct service over 3,000 people. And I've had the opportunity to help a lot of people get sober. And friends and family often ask me, they say, well, why do you still call yourself a drug addict? You hadn't done drugs in a long time. And I always tell them, I've never seen a cucumber go back to being a pickle. I have given away my right to a chemical peace of mind. One too many for me and 1,000 not enough. And it was never the second, third, fourth, or fifth one. It was always the first one that got me. And people often say, well, you don't look like an addict. Well, we don't use the term addict. You don't look like you have a substance use disorder. And I tell them, what do we look like? Because we are your brother, we're your cousin, we're your uncle, your daddies, we're your mothers, we're your aunties, and we do recover. And I don't hide what I am from anybody. I've got on the news, and I used to do all of the. They used to call me the opiate czar. I used to work with Phil Brown a lot, doing a lot of the opiate stuff on TV. And I get this idea that it's something I should hide, and I should hide behind a button down and a blazer in this office that I sit in, and I should be dignified and with esteem. And I'm a people's person. But for the grace of God, I'm an alcoholic and I am a drug addict. I am. I call my clients and say they have a substance use disorder. I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict, and I'll be there till the day I die. And I don't mind being there as long as I'm one that's not actively using. Everything I've been through made me who I am. And excuse my language, but I'm pretty damn proud of who I am today. I've put a lot of work in to become the man that I am. And I still put boots on the ground. I have the opportunity now serving as the clinic director to sit in the office and go to a lot of meetings and talk about finances and administration stuff. But the only reason prior to this, I worked my way through the ranks at Hines Behavioral Health from being a peer support. I don't know if any of you all know what that is, but I started with a $10 hour job, and I worked there, and I worked at Pig and Pint Barbecue, serving tables. And I had picked up my first year of sobriety, and I was the happiest I had ever been. I had some little house out there in South Jackson where I had to have burglar bars on it, but guess what? It was mine. I was sober, and I saw God working in my life. And I just kept going. I went to graduate school. I worked those 2 jobs. I finished. I was a peer support. Dr. Kathy Crockett. I always tell people, and she get upset with me about this. She built my career. She saw something in me that I did not see it myself. And much like Tommy Green and Judge Kidd, these people believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I don't know what they saw in me, but I saw the same little buck-tooth skinny boy who was using drugs to hide who he was. And I have all these tattoos, and I was, because where I come from, you don't show weakness. To admit that I was an addict or an alcoholic would show that I was weak. And I was fortunate enough for Tommy Green to sit me in front of Winston Kidd, the man that I called my daddy now. And that man rode me, and he rode me, and he told me that I'm gonna put you in jail if you don't finish what you started. And I was able to get off paper, and I was able to have my record expunged. Some great things have happened in my life. And I just want to fast forward because I know I have limited time. I sat in front of this man facing 21 years in prison, and today I go in the judge's chambers and I speak with all of them, from Brian Bailey to Trowbridge when he was in Madison, to the mayor of Jackson. These are friends and colleagues of mine who I can call on in time of need. They know my mission. They bag me in all that I do. And the only reason that I took an administrative job was because I realized that if I can just, Dr. Crockett told me, she said, Jeffery, I need 7 Jeffries, but I can't go back and clone you. She said, well, how can I get 7 Jeffries? I told her, well, I don't know. She said, the best way I can get that is if I get you to train people. She said, you can't give them your passion, but you can give them your vision.
Absolutely.
And I went from being a therapist to being the director of alcohol and drug services for Hines Behavioral Health. And I have since went on to do what I'm doing now. But I still love the people. I love to walk down the lobby. I like to meet their kids, their families. And I like to buy candy for their children and buy them lunches. For Mental Health Month, I bought them donuts and a coffee pot because they remind me of who I was and who I can still be if I make a dumb decision. So I don't know how much time I have left, but I ended with this. I have had the luxury of living 2 lives in one lifetime. I was able to use that house in South Jackson that I bought as a sober living transition house that I take people out of treatment centers and I give them a place to stay until they get a job. I help them find a job. And I have since went on to, I send out back now. I stay in this nice little pretty suburb. I sit back here and I still look and I try to figure out, I have a pond in the front with cranes and ducks. This from some little boy who come from Jackson, Mississippi, and I sit up and try to figure out how did I get from there to here. So we're talking about Mental Health Month this month, and I want to say
Absolutely.
this. We are skillful people. I am a provisional LPC. We're in here with a lot of LCSWs. We're in here with a lot of smart people. But I will say this because I give him the glory. Minus him, I'm nothing and nothing good but God. That's what his word said. And he gave each and every last one of us our talents. So let's remember him in Mental Health Month and know that with him, we can do all things because he strengthened us. And if that's my time, I'm going to hit the button.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We really, really appreciate that that warming testimony that you had, and giving praise to your higher power for all the things that you have been through. We're looking forward to hearing more about your journey in your substance abuse recovery. We're looking forward to hearing more about treatment for substance use disorder. And just for us to learn more about resources that are out there in the community. So our next panelist that we will hear from will be Rachel Daniels. She will come to us in her very own way. I turn it over to you, Rachel.
I think Shalonda was going to be next.
Oh, you're the closer. Okay. All right, Shalonda, we'll go with your presentation.
Thank you so much. Does everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So today I have the pleasure of talking about depression. So we're going to talk about it. So the key points from this presentation, I'm going to talk about what is depression, give you some statistics on depression, and I wanted to talk about signs of depression with women, men, and teens, and also give you coping strategies to deal with depression. So what is depression? So depression is persistent sadness and a loss of interest in activities that you normally enjoy, accompanied by inability to carry out your daily activities for at least 2 weeks. It disrupts your mood, sleep. You may not be able to do things that you normally would do, as far as go to work or get out of bed. So some causes of depression, we have genetics, biochemical, environment, and physiological. Other causes of depression that are not on the screen is abuse. That can be physical, sexual, emotional abuse. Age. People who are elderly are at higher risk of depression that can be made worse by other factors, such as living alone and having a lack of social support. Certain medications, some drugs can increase your risk of having depression. Conflict. Depression is someone who has biologically vulnerability to it may result from personal conflicts or disputes with family members, co-workers. Also, other causes of depression is death or loss. And it doesn't have to be death, it could be divorce. Gender, women are as twice as likely as men to become depressed. Sometimes it's your genes. If you have a family history of depression, it may increase your risk. Major events, one of the events that had an increase in depression and anxiety was COVID-19 pandemic, but it could be other things. And depression, causes of depression can be different for everybody. It could be loss of a job, moving, retiring, getting married, graduating, you know, if you're having a different transition in your life. Other personal problems, problems such as like if you're being isolated due to mental illness, that also can be causes of depression. Substance misuse, nearly 30% of people with substance misuse problems also have a major or clinical depression. So some statistics, mental health is a topic that many African Americans consider taboo and don't often discuss. Depression is one of the most common mental illness, but it's under-recognized and underrated problem among African Americans. We have done a great job with combating depression and talking about mental illness, but we still have a long way to go. We have about 1 in 5 Americans struggle with mental illness in any given year. African Americans are 20% more likely to have serious psychological distress than whites. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among African Americans ages 15 to 24. And less than half of all Americans with mental disorders get treatment that they need. But proportion of African Americans who need mental health treatment and get it only half that of whites. So African American are 4 times more likely to die by suicide African American men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than African American women are. So it's clear that depression is a serious problem for African Americans. Ignoring those problems or pretending that they don't exist won't make them go away. So on the screen, you see some symptoms in women. Constant irritability may have a drastic change in eating patterns, headaches, chronic pain, digestive disorders. In men, have problems concentrating, remembering information, making decisions. They may have some aches, pains, and troubles falling asleep, and also have digestive problems. And I wanted to add teens. Teens have some of those same issues as well, but sometimes in teens it may look a little different. It could be some of the causes of adolescents having issues. It could be from poor social skills, trauma, relationships, independent conflict with parents or guardians. And some of the signs of depressions are academic challenges, unexplained aches and pains, and they have to be depressed, irritable, or sad for at least 2 weeks as well. Okay, so reasons we keep it a secret. We still are focusing on changing this mental health stigma. Other reasons that we keep it a secret, we're still combating generational thinking. You know, back in slavery, you know, the first thing that African Americans had that was safe was the church. So when you start saying we don't need to go to the church and we need to go talk to somebody, it can be taboo. I've heard plenty of my clients say, you know, I've been trying to get help for the last, 3 or 4 years. And, my mom or my family say, you just need to pray it out of you. You need to go to church more. So, sometimes we keep it a secret because of those things. And also, like Jeffery said, it can make you appear weak, a feeling of shame, and then also thinking that it can destroy your career. So if you notice a friend have been going through a difficult time for a while, it may be time for you to reach out and find help. It's normal for someone to feel sad after a death or when he's sick or going through a breakup, struggling at work or school, or having money problems. But if the sadness doesn't go away, keeps coming back, lasts more than a few weeks, or makes it hard to carry on with daily life, it may be depression. So if you look on the screen, it's just a few suggestions to, to say, I've been worried about you. I see that you've been having trouble sleeping. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Sometimes it's just a delivery of how you come to somebody. Positive support can go a long way when helping someone that's dealing with depression or any mental health issues. So we know that depression is treatable. There aren't any quick fixes when it comes to depression, but with patience and a plan, people with depression can definitely recover. Options to treat depression include counseling, psychotherapy, and medication. The difference between counseling and psychotherapy is that counseling focuses on the specific issues and is designed to help a person address a particular problem, such as addiction or stress management. Counseling is also usually more than a short term than therapy. Psychotherapy is more long term than counseling and focuses on a broad range of issues. The goal of psychotherapy is to uncover a person's negative patterns of thinking and helping them learn new and healthier ways to think and interact. A mental health professional can work with you to design a treatment plan that best fits your individual needs. Finding the right mental health professional may be trial and error. It's important to spend time finding the right person for you. Don't become discouraged. If therapy or counseling doesn't work out the first session, if you have a preference for a male or African American therapist, you can use the resource listed on the Accessing Mental Health Services website. It's a lot of different therapy for Black girls. It's a lot of different resources that you can find a great therapist. And also word of mouth, talk to people. It's important you find somebody that you can connect with. And it's just like you interviewing somebody from a job. You don't have to take the first therapist that you see, you interview them. Other ways that you can treat depression, self-care, that's so important. A lot of us don't take care of ourselves like we should. And self-care is not manis and petties. Self-care is an inactivity to do an activity on purpose. So it's more than just relaxation therapeutic measures. Mindfulness, that's another one. Living in the power of now. We typically, when we're going to day-to-day activities, we're thinking about what we're doing next week, what we got to do this evening. We're not living right now. Just for example, right now we're supposed to be enjoying this mental health forum, getting valuable information to help us, help ourselves, and help others. So mindfulness is living in the power of now, and also creating positive support. This is so important. If you are around people that are negative or always a problem focused and not solution focused, that can hinder your mental health. So making sure you create a positive support environment during your journey. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Shalonda, for that information on depression. We know that depression is one of those tricky things, because a lot of times we tend to think that we're just in a funk, or we're just not feeling good. Today is just a bad day, and then it expands off into a bad week, into a bad month, and then before you know it, you're sitting there and being depressed for a couple of months, and you're not sure what's going on. So we're going to get into some questions and answers from the panel, so we can be able to kind of decipher, how do you know the difference when you're just having a bad day, or just going through bereavement or grief, or is this actually something I need to go and get some help for? So thank you for that. Ms. Rachel is going to come to us now in her very own way, and she's going to present some information to us.
Hello, everyone. So I am going to talk about trauma. I do want to give a quick update on that bio that was read. I am a former mental health commissioner for Hines Behavioral Health and really enjoyed my experience there. So I want to start with a land and labor acknowledgement. In the 20 years that I have worked as a licensed social worker, I have been honored to work directly with trauma survivors, their families, and the professionals who work directly with them. This short time that we have together will be a conversation starter, as I could spend literally a full week talking in detail about trauma. As a prevention-focused professional, I hope to offer a few points that I believe are helpful to any one of us, as any of us has the potential to be exposed to trauma in our lifetime, know someone who will, while also hoping that we can all work together to prevent trauma when possible. It is important that we destigmatize the symptoms of trauma, removing the barriers and increasing support and resources for healthy recovery. Trauma is a word that we hear a lot, and I hope that when you leave this virtual space, you can feel confident that you understand when you or someone you love is facing it. So let's dive in. I'd like to start with the word triggered. In the chat, please share what you believe the word triggered means. Understanding its meaning, knowing when we are triggered or activated and what to do can empower us and decrease the potential for re-traumatizing ourselves or others. Triggering is a brain and body response, a sensory experience. It's a clue or a reminder that can be connected to trauma. We will talk about this more in a second, but before we dive deeper, I'd invite you to either choose to observe or choose to participate, if it feels comfortable for you, in a quick collective community grounding exercise. This can help us keep our brains online, keep us in our window of tolerance where our body feels safe, connected, and attached. I want you to know that you can't mess this up. Be sure that you're in a safe place to participate, and you are welcome to contain for later anything that takes your attention away from this present moment. We will start by taking in a nice deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. You are welcome to keep your eyes open or closed as we work together to keep each other protected and safe in this virtual space. Take a breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Allow yourself to be calm. Find a calm place using all of your senses. Permission to take your breath. You can wrap your arms around you in a butterfly hug as you experience safe, healthy touch. And thank parts of you that have helped you survive. Permission to take your breath. Listen and feel the drum of your heartbeat. Permission to take your breath. Soften and relax your forehead, your jaw, your shoulders, your hands, and your legs. Feeling the ground underneath your feet supporting you. Today, you can take what is beneficial for you and leave what is not. It is your choice. Take one last breath in. And one last big breath out. Very good. You may open your eyes if they were closed and lower your arms and just notice how you feel. I am hoping that we all feel calm as we transition to defining trauma. You know, two people can experience the very same event, but react in different ways. In the chat, type out, how do you define trauma without including any specific details? In order to understand trauma, we have to know about our body and how our body tries to protect us for survival. We have to know about our brain, the smoke detector part of our brain called the amygdala, our nervous system, our vagus nerve, our body stress response, how our emotions are connected, and memory processing. Trauma is a natural, emotional human response to an event, a hard life experience, series of events, or a set of enduring conditions within context that exceeds our capacity to cope. I want you to think an event that involves fear, overwhelm, terror, pain, threat, feeling unsafe, feeling powerless, a violation or danger towards my life, my body, or my ego integrity. Permission to take your breath. This causes an abnormal stress that disrupts our emotional functioning and evokes a stressed state in our body, activating our instinctual fear center. To protect us from harm and to help us to react to the threat to get to safety, our brain activates energy through the release of chemicals in our body like adrenaline and cortisol, and through engaging our organs like increasing our heart rate. Some people are able to process inward after an experience like this, discharging and metabolizing the energy and integrating the experience in a short time, where they're able to leave the past in the past while maintaining a positive belief in themselves. To do this, we need a base of safety, a soft place to nurture our pain, the wound, that injury, while we go into the hard place, the hard spot, those hard feelings, and move through it. We need trusted people that can witness our pain, co-regulate with us, and show positive reactions to our needs, while acknowledging that our reactions make sense in the moment right after the event. We need people to validate our emotions with tenderness, respect our boundaries, and help us with resources to cope. Healing happens in positive relationships. So just like a broken bone will heal when we create the right environment for healing, trauma can be healed too. There are many different types of traumas. We can experience a single traumatic event that acutely happens, like a terrifying car accident. We can experience chronic trauma that is repeated and prolonged, like bullying. Or we can experience complex trauma that involves varied and multiple traumatic events that may be invasive, that may be within our caregiving systems, that may be interpersonal. Here, the very people we should trust and rely on as our base of safety are the cause of the harm. Permission to take your breath. We can experience racial trauma, that is mental and emotional injury caused by the daily reality of surviving racial stress from racism, bias, oppression, discrimination, or hate crimes. There is systemic trauma that promotes practices and procedures that involves phobias and isms and marginalization, disempowerment, prejudice, and stigma. There are adverse childhood experiences that can cause relational, attachment, or developmental trauma, like physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, human or sex trafficking, physical or emotional neglect, witnessing domestic or interpersonal violence, or being separated from a caregiver, like through incarceration or foster care. There is intergenerational trauma that gets passed down from those who directly experienced an event to subsequent generations, like slavery, the Holocaust, or harm to the indigenous population. There is collective trauma, where an entire group of people experience the very same event, like COVID-19, mass violence, or natural disasters. There is vicarious trauma, or secondary traumatic stress, where we absorb other people's traumas after being exposed to their trauma stories. We can have experiences that cause traumatic grief, medical or mental health trauma, or religious trauma. And our military members can be exposed to trauma through war. So trauma is not the event, although no one should have to experience many of the events I just described. What I want you to think about is that trauma is the injury or the wound in the body created by the event. Permission to take your breath. One study found that 70% of our population will experience one overwhelming trauma in their lifetime. In the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, it found that 2/3 of the study population experienced at least one childhood adversity. So many of us around us are facing and experiencing trauma. To try to cope, stabilize our mood, find relief, we may use unhealthy means. We may try to think ourselves out of the event or the incident or the injury because it is difficult to connect to our bodies. We may have addictions, use substances, have self-harming behaviors like cutting. We may try to check out, numb, flatten, or suppress what is happening within our body. We end up learning that some ways that we are using for protection are actually getting in the way of our healing. But there is hope. There is always hope. And recovery and post-trauma growth is absolutely possible with the appropriate support and under the optimal conditions. We have to get safe. We have to get away from the danger that's causing chronic trauma. And I want you to know that there is so much wisdom in our body. Right now, we hold the answers to our recovery and to our healing. Our bodies know how to heal. So what we want to do is draw on the intelligence of our body. And with support, we can activate our body towards a healing state where we can find balance, coping through in healthy ways while we process, metabolize the energy, complete the stress response, and information processing. If you need help with this, you can find trauma-trained, culturally competent mental health providers in your community that you feel safe with, that you know will hold your information confidently, and that will work with you in a patient, loving, kind, professional way. Remember, the trigger, the charge is the place of the wound. What is coming up in our body has meaning, and it is the place to be healed. Thank you so much for being here today. I look forward to the questions we have.
Thank you so much for that mindful, that meditation that you brought to us on today, Rachel. It definitely did me some good with the breathing and becoming aware of my surroundings and making sure that I was in a safe place on tonight. As you all heard from the panelists, you probably wondering why are we focusing on substance use, depression, and as well as trauma. These are some of the most prevalent mental health conditions that we are faced with in our communities. There are many, many others that it would take weeks for us to cover them all. And it would definitely take us another couple of weeks for us to even dive deep into some of the other disorders that we are facing in the United States. But I wanted to share with you all that you heard from Shalonda, you heard from Jeffery, and you heard from Rachel. A lot of these things intertwine, and what we call that is comorbid conditions. So Shalonda talked about depression. We heard Jeffery talk about substance use. We also heard Rachel. She talked about trauma. And some of the things that we need to understand is trauma can sometimes cause depression. It can be the forefront of depression. And also trauma can also be a reason why someone will start using substance abuse. So we're going to go into our discussion and our questions. We did poll the community prior to this particular session. So I do have some questions already that are lined up. I will now ask the audience as well. Please, if you are wanting to ask any questions and additional questions, please go into the question and answer box and please post your questions there. I do have some pre-questions again that I am going to share with us, and I will start with the first one. Why do you think people are more reluctant to seek assistance when they are dealing with mental health issues versus when they are dealing with a physical ailment? And so I will pitch this question to Shalonda. We'll start with you. You're on mute.
Thank you. It goes back to that mental health stigma. You know, what have we been taught? You know, we've been taught that we go to the doctor when we're having physical symptoms. You know, we have these great prevention awareness month on obesity, cancer, sickle cell, diabetes. But with mental health, we still have a long way to go. People still see it as a bad thing, not that I'm dealing with something, I'm having a mental health challenge, and I need to put some things in place to help me feel better.
Okay, thank you, Shalonda. What is your take on that, Rachel? why do you think the community, and I understand that Ms. Shalonda has given us some great pointers as to why we feel that our community does not seek mental health treatment, but they are quick to go if they have issues with their blood pressure or issue with their diabetes. Just tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And I don't know if we don't do as good a job with our physical health as we do we need to as well. But mental health is the stigma that's connected to it, and feeling like I'm crazy, I'm out of control. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? And as a preventative mental health professional, I try to help individuals that I'm working with see that mental health impacts every other aspect of your life. And so if we don't have our mental health in check, then it's going to impact our physical health. It's going to impact our social health, our relationships. It's going to help impact our occupational health, right? Our jobs, our income coming in. And so if we can get comfortable with the thought, if I can work towards maintaining my mental health, then I'm going to be able to work towards being the best version of myself in every other aspect of my life.
Absolutely. And Jeffery, I'm just curious about from a male perspective. I know that men are one of the hardest ones to get them to even go to the doctor for physical ailments. Why do you think it's even tougher to get them to the doctor to see someone for a mental health condition?
I think it's all tied together. We separate it. Like, so we say, first of all, I don't think we see mental health and physical health. We see physical health as almost life-threatening, but mental health is kind of like, are you a nut job? Something wrong with you? And and I'm gonna be honest with you, for a long time, the church was actually somebody touched on it, was like the cornerstone of this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, well, you just need to pray. Right. And God's not gonna take schizophrenia away from me, like I said, any more than he take the substance use disorder from me, but he sent me these people like Rachel and Shalonda and you, Miss Sharetta and Tanisha. He sent me these people who had these different things to help me, but primarily in the African American community, it's so much stigma there that people would just hide from what's going on with them, and like I sweep it under the rug, like if nobody knows. I equate it to the ostrich that stick his head in the sand, right? So if I just stick my head in the sand, this lion is not gonna see me, right? And he's not gonna come behind me and knock my back off. So it's the same thing. Like if I don't tell anybody how I'm feeling, if I don't tell anybody what I'm hearing voices, or I'm feeling like I want to commit suicide, or if I don't tell anybody, then it's not happening. But it's happening and it's real. And the second thing I'll say, I hadn't had a chance to like stroll through. I don't see a lot of men in here, and that's a problem. We have this. I'll tell you this. I go to the doctor twice a year. I have my own therapist. That he, and that's because I work in this. But we don't see a lot of men here. And to be honest, a lot of times we depend on our mother, sister, wife, girlfriend, fiance. Well, she'll take care of me. When she go to the doctor, I go to the doctor, so to speak. Fortunately enough for me, I just know these things are important. I want to know what my A1C is. I want to know if I have if I'm slipping back into some old behavior. I want to know if I'm having some. I attended Rachel's. I had to look, and I attended Rachel's trauma training last year. We went to a conference together, and I knew her face. And I learned a lot about trauma because I'm honest enough to say this, because I think this forum is for this. I'm honest enough to say at first I was like, look, trauma, I get it. Then we get into compounding trauma and these. But until I listened to her training, it didn't make sense to me. And I say that because it's the same way with a lot of males, that we hear things and it sounds either soft or just like, and until we sit down and listen to somebody's story or testimony about it, right? Because that's what teach me.
Mm-hmm. And I hear what you're saying, Jeffery, because some folks may not even understand that what they're dealing with or what's happening to them may be related to a mental illness that they really need to go and speak with someone about.
Sure.
So go ahead, Shalonda.
Sharetta, I was just going to add, I'm going to be very brief. If you hadn't heard of John Heed, he wrote a book called Black Men in Depression. It's a really good book. And he talked about his struggles with depression and what he faced when he was younger. About, we were taught not to be weak. You don't cry. What's wrong with you? They weren't taught to be vulnerable and sensitive. They've always been taught to be strong. So how dare I go to somebody and get some help because I'm feeling sad? How dare, because this is what they've been taught all of their life. So that was some of the things that he talked about in his book, Black Men in Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that brings us to another question that I did receive from the community. And it states, I'm 20 years old and I'm a Black male. How can I tell if any of my male friends are needing mental health help? I pitched this one to Jeffrey. We'll start with you.
Again, sugar and spice and everything nice, right? As young men, we start getting these terms that kind of paint us, and we say, "Well, I'm just, I'm kind of jacked up." And to be honest, men in this day and age, we're judged by the size of our wallet, right? And these things that they play in our mind, and men are not going to Black men primarily. I'll use my own personal experience. I didn't want to walk into an office and tell somebody that I'm using this. I'll admit to this substance, but I don't want to tell this substance because then you might think I'm a drug addict, right? Or you might think I have a substance use disorder or something wrong with me. And I don't want to go sit in front of somebody. And to be honest, if I did, I want to be able to go sit in front of a woman. And the reason it was because I didn't have a lot of male examples. And I feel like if I tell a man this, I'm really weak, right? In some kind of way, like he's gonna go tell other men, it's gonna get around, it's my reputation. I didn't have much of a reputation, but anyway, I was kind of a legend in my own mind. But it goes back to the stigma this tied with these things. Like if I'm depressed and I'm thinking about hurting myself, or I'm thinking about I don't want to get out of bed, right? I don't want to go to work. I feel like I'm supposed to pick myself up by the bootstraps and go make money and pay these bills. And a lot of times I had to catch myself early on with that's how I showed my love to my daughters, right? If I buy you this, if I send you here, if I pay for this. And it took I fortunately enough, I had some very I'll say this and keep it short. That feminine touch always gets African American men. For me, it was my daughters, and they had to just tell me, like, Daddy. I think I made the comment about life insurance or something, and I told her, well, she said, well, you're gonna work yourself to death, Dad. I said, well, look, I got a life insurance policy, and she stopped me at 13 years old. And she said, Dad, I don't care about money. I would much rather have my dad here with me. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks. That I need to be concerned with taking care of myself and being here for these girls and being an example for them of how a man's supposed to treat you. Because I tell men this all the time, and this is a punchline. You are the first love of your daughter's life. We can take our little boys being tough and kind of going through what we went through. Boys don't cry. Get up, I give you something to cry about. But fortunately enough for me, God didn't give me a boy. He gave me little girls. And that showed me that they helped me get in touch with that sensitive side that y'all were talking about and how to take care of myself. And it's okay to cry. It cleans your soul, and it's okay to be kind of vulnerable. Otherwise, you don't experience life. So and I will say this, I think it takes other men like me, who a lot of times they'll listen and they'll say, well, man, how you get like this? I have to tell them my experience. And I tell them my experience, and I tell them it's liberating. It's free to be like this. Like I don't have any mask, or like I'm an open book. Like I don't have to hide anything from anybody. And it's freedom. And money can't buy it.
Absolutely. Oh, those are some great pointers for anyone who is wanting to know more about, what can we do to help our communities, and particularly male or female, when they are experiencing mental health, and why do they choose not to go? So we do understand now from the panelists that we're hearing that there's still a lot of stigma. Stigma has been around for a number of years. I recall, and I know I'm not the panelist, but I recall the stories of when you used to hear about that grandmother or that uncle that was locked up in the room all the time, and
Uncle
family
Willie.
members never really let them out. Right. It was probably because they was experiencing some type of mental health condition. So, and they kept them there away from others. So just be mindful about those things. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I was going to just add just a little bit to that last question about how do I know about if I should be concerned about someone else. You know, when you think about a physical injury, you can see a broken bone, you can see a scrape, right? But when mental health, that's invisible. And so using a mind-body approach, we can pay attention to what's happening in people's bodies, right? Are they sleeping? How's the person eating? Is the person withdrawing, right? Disconnecting from their hobbies, interests, the things that they enjoy, the people that they enjoy. Are you noticing that they're not managing their stress well? I'm, acting out. I'm, my patience is really low, right? Those are all some indicators to say, hey, let me just ask, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Right. And because sometimes when we're in the depth of a mental health challenge, we may not recognize it ourselves. It is really good that we have a concern of wanting to be aware of what we may be able to pay attention to with other people that we care about and love.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Rachel. So it brings me to another question that I have from the audience regarding teenagers. And is there any, I know Shalonda, you did hit on that in your presentation regarding the difference in depression regarding adults and teenagers. Is there any specific behaviors that mothers or fathers can, or even friends can be on the lookout for when they have noticing some changes with their loved ones who may be experiencing depression?
I always tell parents that come to my office, it's your approach. It's your approach. And sometimes we have to step back and check ourselves. We have to have these preconceived notions of how we were raised, where you're going to respect me. You're going to look at me when you're talking to me. How dare you? We got to throw that out the window. We got to come with a different approach. We have different teens that we are raising. Not that they're supposed to be disrespectful, but if you're seeing that they're doing something out of the abnormal, talking to them about it, have check-ins. It's ways to get information. And what we've seen is a lot of teens, if they're struggling with something, they typically won't go to their parents. So making sure that that parent has positive supports, if it's a sister or if it's the best friend's mom, making sure everybody provides that positive support. But it is kind of difficult for teens sometimes with parents. And it just depends on the approach of how the parent is coming to that child. And sometimes we also know that sometimes teens don't want to talk to their parents. They don't know anything in their mind. They don't know anything. So I always tell parents to make sure that you find out who your children's circle is, get to know those parents. If you have a younger aunt or somebody, making sure that that child has somebody to talk to, because it's all about you finding people that's going to help you better connect with your child. If that answers the question.
Oh, that absolutely answers the questions, because we do know, again, like you stated, this is a different day and age, and teenagers they communicate differently.
They do.
And so we do have to find ways to get that information from them. And if they're not going to give it to the parents, we have to have other support systems out there in place in the event that they are sharing it with their best friend, and then maybe the best friend has a good relationship with their parent, and that information will eventually get back to the teen that's suffering parents as well. So that leads me to another question regarding, were you about to say something, Jeffrey?
Just quick, somebody in the chat put some up there that I think was pertinent. They said that as a culture, do we really understand what depression is? Mm-hmm. Right. So I say, as a male, I'll say, I just don't feel like getting up today. I don't need, we have this thing about any medication, it's crazy medicine. right? And when we started out, you said something. You said that these are the more prevalent ones. When I used to go out and talk to people, they hear the ones like schizophrenia, bipolar, and they think those are, but like anxiety,
Right.
depression, these are the ones that primarily walk into. And I don't think as a culture we know like the warning signs. Like me personally, anybody who knows me, I just have natural high anxiety. It doesn't matter what I do, I just have high anxiety. And but I've learned to use it. I learned that what the contributors was, and I learned whether it was good or whether it was bad anxiety. When it's bad anxiety, it paralyzes me. These are things people need to know. When it's good anxiety, guess what it make me do? It make me get up, submit that report tonight that I should have did earlier today. That's a good anxiety. It keep me busy and it makes sure I get things done. But when anxiety starts to paralyze me, it's a problem. Depression, when depression starts to cause interferences in my daily activities. I mean, all the clinical staff here know what I mean, but it started interfering with my ability to get up on time for work, how I feel when I go to work. These are things that could be a toxic work environment. It can be all these different things that we don't look at. We just think it's normal life. And over time, prolonged activities like that, what starts to go from a mild depression, and you start going over into major depression and full fledged. So I think as a culture, we need to make a bigger impact on like telling people, especially in the African American community, like what are the warning signs of these things? Yeah.
Well,
But
thank
as
you.
as a culture, we have been taught to be strong. I don't know if y'all watch Scandal. That was one of my favorite shows. I wish it was still back on the air. But
Olivia Pope.
if you know the relationship with Papa Pope and Olivia Pope, even the way he talked to her, she had to be strong. It was no crying, no being upset. We're going to problem solve these issues. We have been taught as a culture to be strong. So sometimes when we depressed, we feel like we don't have a reason to be depressed. We need to figure a way out. And then we start using negative coping skills to deal with things.
Thank you, Shalonda. And Jeffrey, and you and Shalonda hit on some things. I wanted to make sure that Rachel get the opportunity to chime in too as well. Knowing the difference, when do you need to go and seek help? And Jeffrey, I heard you say some things about when it started impacting your life, your relationships and things of that nature. So I'm going to let Rachel talk a little bit about that as well.
Very good question. And the way I like to frame it is, let's try to create habits and practices daily to maintain our mental health as much as possible. So we're not waiting until a crisis. Until we're completely out of control and it's impacting all of our domains in life, right? So what are the things that I can do? What supports do I need to have? What resources do I need that's going to allow me to work towards maintaining my mental health? Now, when I do get to that crisis point where it is impacting my day-to-day life, I don't have the energy. I don't have the mindset. I have negative chronic thoughts. I have belief patterns that are getting in the way, right? I'm seeing conflict constantly. I'm struggling with basic stuff like eating, like sleeping. And this is a common thing. I get to speak at conferences all over the state to professionals. I work directly with professionals and we aren't sleeping. We are not getting rest. And so if I'm seeing that that's a chronic thing for me, let me see if I can get help for it. Because that's where I like to start as a provider. If I can get you to get some sleep where your brain can rest, right? Where we can start processing some stuff, start getting rid of some stuff, start storing some stuff that we need. If I can get some good food in my body that's going to fuel this vessel, if I can get support resources around me so I don't feel like I am completely alone in this incredibly big world, then I'm going to be able to see some improvements in my mental health. Otherwise, if I'm alone and I'm constantly withdrawing and I'm pushing people away and they're trying to get help, then the condition is just going to get worse.
Thank you, Rachel. I have one more question, and then I'm gonna pitch it to Angela Noble. She's gonna go into the question and answering chat box. But this is one question that I have that I just wanted to start with Jeffrey on. Jeffrey, can you tell us a little bit about why do the community feels that cannabis is okay? And what is your take on that?
I'll say this: we living in a society right now. And nobody likes their reality, and I don't just necessarily think it's marijuana, but I'll lead into marijuana. You can go on any social media, Snapchat, Facebook. I have none of it, right? I just don't, right? Because you can go on these things and you can paint this vivid picture of what my life is. And I have personally known clients who go on Facebook and they see these things, and it makes them feel bad about their reality. It's like, well, he got this beautiful wife and he got this big house, and then you see this person, it's not even reality, right? So it's the same thing. We live in a pain-free society that people don't want to, like, they don't want their reality anymore. So and this is not weed that they're smoking. Like, look, I smoke weed. I won't dare ask any of you all to talk about your high school escapades, but this weed they're smoking, this is not Woodstock weed. Like, this is not like we were eating our mother food up and like giggling all night. Like, this weed can send them into what we would diagnose as a psychosis, like a substance-induced psychosis. This is very strong high-grade marijuana. And actually, they did some research to show that children who are smoking it are linked to increased rates of heart disease later on. Yes. So like, and I'll sum it up with this and give everybody else time to, you go home and it's prevalent. Like, you can get in any car right now and ride through anywhere in any city, I'll say. And the weed they're smoking is so strong. Your windows can be up, theirs can be up. You can ride by them. It'll go out of their car, under your car, and it smell like a skunk. And it's everywhere. Like, you can go outside and you smell it. My point is, it has become so normalized that people don't have that natural that harm, that the perception of harm attached to it. It's just weed, right? And it goes back into what I was talking about with me. That's exactly the way I saw it. But what I didn't know, I was genetically predisposed, because again, I never met my father. So I was genetically predisposed. I didn't know it. Somebody gave me weed. I went from a pauper to Prince Charming in my mind, right? And it opened the door for me to do other things. So in the long run, I think this is going to be dangerous. Parents are smoking weed, and it's just kind of like, it's just weed, you know. And children are more likely to smoke weed now, and their parent not say anything. So I think prevalence is why it's an obsession with weed, and then we add legislation to it, where you can go to any doctor. Fun fact, and I'm done. Went to my doctor last week. I was having some back pains, and I won't call the doctor's name. Great doctor. I sat in there, and this lady walks in the room. She's a nurse practitioner. She said, "Mr. Harvey, I do not like to see you in pain like that." And I looked at her and I said, "I don't either." And she said, "Well, I'm the cannabis specialist here, and we do give cannabis license here, this, that, and another." Right? And I just looked at this lady, started laughing. I was like, "Man, you don't want to give me weed." And my doctor came in the room and he kind of explained to her, and then he was like, "Okay, yeah." But this is what's happening. You're gonna go to your doctor and you're gonna have a migraine headache, and they're gonna tell you, "Miss Young, I don't like to see you with these constant headaches." My point is prevalence. We're handing out, it's become so normalized that everybody's doing it. So there's no perception of harm attached to it anymore. But it will be disastrous, and it will lead to some bad consequences. Go to any state where they've legalized marijuana. It did not give them the outcome that they thought was going to happen. And I will tell you this, just because it's legal does not mean you can get a job, right? Because you can smoke weed and not go to jail, but if you apply for a job and don't pass a drug test with me, you're not going to get it. And that's going to add to the economic burden that we're going to start experiencing from this too.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for those consequences of marijuana. I want to remind the audience as well to make sure that you all are, please do us a favor and do the survey. And the survey should be, link is found in the chat. It was posted by, I think, Natalie Blackman. So if you see that jot form, please click on that and do our survey for us. And I'll turn it over to you, Angela, so we can go through our questions that were placed into the Q&A.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Noble. Thank you all, panelists. This has been marvelous. Such wonderful information for everyone. I do have some questions that, about 10 questions that are in our chat. The first one is for you, Mr. Harvey. It says, during this time of medical marijuana and increased legalization of marijuana, what would you say to those who believe that marijuana is not a gateway drug?
I'm gonna keep it brief because I know we got a lot of questions. I'll say this: there's this book. It's called DSM-5. If people want to smoke marijuana, my issue is with children smoking marijuana, and we start getting to these edibles and all these kind of things that they look like candy. Like,
yes.
I've saw some packaging, and they give it to kids. This stuff is high grade. It can cause some serious health conditions with children, as I outlined earlier. As far as we're doing this, the prevalence is there. People don't like their reality. Everybody wants to change how they feel. So we're doing this. We got signs. They writing prescriptions. They passing legislation. We're going. This is going to happen. But I'll say this: when it gets to what clinical people in here we would call criteria, when it gets to criteria, then we have a problem, because now we're getting over into substance use disorder. And my personal experience, and this is just my opinion, and they have research to back it, so over the last 30 years, the marijuana is a gateway drug. And then once I put marijuana in me, it's easier for me to go and do something else. That's a fact. That's not my opinion necessarily. That's just a fact.
Thank you, Jeffery. And I just want to just reiterate what the meaning of gateway. It means it opened up the door for you to try and experiment harder drugs more often as well. So what Jeffery is saying, that sometimes for some who are predisposed to an addiction, if it runs in their family, is it genetics, it does open up the brain, the chemical in the brain, for you to want more drugs and more harder drugs as well. So that's what he means when he's saying something about a gateway drug. So, and Angela, I'll turn it back over to you. Please keep our responses to about 5 to 10 seconds, because we do have limited time.
Okay, thank you. And for those that put your question in the Q&A that say anonymous attendee or Zoom user, if I ask your question, read your question, please send me a message, in a direct message with your name and your email address, please. So our next question is, what are the first few signs to notice of someone who may be going through depression in order to help them to get through that? Ms. Shalonda?
You're on mute, Shalonda.
Okay, I'm sorry, trying to make sure no noise in my background, but some of the signs of depression, it can, like I said, it can vary for different people. You really have to know your people. So you have to be aware of what may be different from them. So some of it could be, sleeping a lot, or not wanting to talk, not wanting to do any of the activities that you all have done in the past. Now, we know that sometimes things come up. They may be having something in their life, like writing their dissertation or a new baby. But if they're just having some things that are just abnormal, crying spells, speaking negative all the time, don't have anything to say positive, may even verbalize that, their worth is not living. Those are signs of depression. And like I said, they can look different for each individual. I like to sleep. If I don't have anything to do, I like to sleep. That doesn't mean that I'm depressed. I just like to sleep.
Right.
But for somebody that's not in their norm, that may be a sign of depression.
Exactly. That's why we have to pay attention to one another.
Absolutely.
Great point. All right, I think we have time for two more.
Okay, I'm gonna say, someone wants to know, could you all discuss the topic for young individuals on mental health who are between the age of 23 to 26, who are in grad school or post-grad starting in the working world? Sometimes social media gives us the notion that we must have it all together or we are way behind. Can you all expound on that for us?
Let
Can
me.
I throw
Go
this
ahead,
out there, Ms.
Jeffery.
Sharetta?
Yes.
A lot of us don't know between those ages where you start seeing late onset for a lot of diagnoses like bipolar, schizophrenia. You know, you see people, you say, well, he wasn't like that in school, and you naturally assume they're on drugs. It could be
Right.
late onset of another more serious psychiatric diagnosis. Also,
And thank you, Jeffrey. Rachel, do you have anything on this topic?
Yes, this is my population. I work with a lot of college students, and particularly over these last couple of years when they were facing the pandemic and they were withdrawn from their social circles and they had so many different adjustments that they were having to face. Many of them were dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of symptoms of depression, lots of substance use trying to cope. Right.
Yes.
Yes, lots of substance use trying to cope. And so as a community, I think it's important for us to all work together to try to help when we see individuals dealing with stress. The college campuses did as good a job as they could to try to wrap a lot of medical services around those students and offer support to them. We saw many students die by suicide during that time period because the stress was just incredible. So the college student population is a population that's near and dear to my heart. And I think we can all be of benefit towards supporting them in their transitions to adulthood.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Now, this one, it says, I thought I had an open door policy with my daughters, and I found out one of my daughters was cutting herself. I was trying to find out what was going on. Can you please give me some pointers on what I can do?
Shalonda, we'll take this one for us, please.
Okay. So first and foremost, I hope that you seeked out a mental health professional to kind of help you navigate through this process. I always say, making sure you're checking in, seeing what's going on, but it's important if she's cutting. And I'm gonna give you an example, a really quick one. I had a young lady that came in. She came in because she had an inpatient stay for suicide. Okay, so she came in. I started getting her biopsychosocial, trying to figure out what was going on to lead to the suicide. Well, she said, I've been depressed for since 8th grade. This was 12th grade. And she said, I've been telling my mom I used to cut myself. And I guess mom at that time just didn't think that was not something that she actually intervened on. It was only till she had that suicide attempt that we tried something different. So if she's cutting, seek a mental health professional, make sure that you're providing the nurturing and love that I know that you are, and just try to come from a way of understanding. And working with that mental health professional, you all can have some family sessions. She can get the help that she needs, and then we can see why she couldn't, what is going on in her life that she feels like that's the only way that she can feel better. If that's just a summary of it.
Thank you, Shalonda.
Thank you.
Also, one more thing. So I have a teen suicide summit. It's going to be the second annual, September 30th of this year. I will give that information to the Jackson alumni chapter. It's going to be September 30th at Tougaloo College. We're going to have breakout sessions. It's going to be really a good event for teens and adults and professionals. So it'll be a great way for you to find information on how to help also in the community resources that are available.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Shalonda.
Thank
And
you very much.
Shalonda, Jeffrey, and Rachel, if you all don't mind, go ahead and put your information, emails or whatnot into the chat. I am now going to ask for our president of Jackson Miss Alumni Chapter, Nikisha Davis. Are you on, Nikisha, for any closing remarks? We may have to ask someone to allow your mic to be unmuted. There you go.
Great evening, everyone. I hope that each of you can hear me this evening. On behalf of the Jackson, Mississippi Alumni Chapter, I would like to extend a huge thank you tonight to our panelists and visiting friends. From hearing a personal testimony tonight, sharing signs of depression, the whole group calming exercise, and understanding trauma, I am confident that we are able to walk away with valuable nuggets to share with family, friends, and our community. To our very knowledgeable panelists tonight, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. The information shared was extremely relatable, and I am sure, as stated before, that we will have a lot to share. Each of you will receive a token of appreciation of our thank you tonight for joining us. To all the attendees, again, thank you for attending. And to our awesome moderator, Sharetta, we would like to say thank you tonight for guiding us through this wonderful session. Again, thank you and have a great night.